Staggered retirements, do they make sense in your individual household? Social Security's finances are eroding further, and it could spell out benefit cuts for you and strategies to boost your retirement savings. All that and more on today's episode of Elevate Your Wealth.
And now, Elevate Your Wealth with Mark Stimpson and Casey Elkins.
Welcome into Elevate Your Wealth. Your hosts are Mark Stimpson and Casey Elkins. They are located right here in Seattle at Elevated Financial Management. 42 combined years of experience between these two, helping hundreds of their clients get ready for retirement. They're certified financial fiduciaries. I'm Morgan Patrick. My pleasure to go back and forth with the advisors each and every week. And it's all about, just having the plan, being ready, being proactive. We're going to give you an opportunity to get on their calendar during the course of this show. And the appointments that we open up, they are complimentary. As I always do, gentlemen, before we jump into our latest articles on retirement and discussion, how was the week?
It was good. In fact, took some friends and we went. I hadn't been down to a Tacoma Rainiers. That's our AAA version of the Mariners in Tacoma, their AAA club. It was fun. That stadium, I hadn't been in a couple years, and that stadium is so nice. It was a great day, so that was really fun. They were actually been playing a little better than the Mariners have been, but it's the doldrums of summer. Casey will be very positive about this because they're going to win the World Series this year.
Mark, on the other hand, is admittedly negative.
Reality is hitting home again.
Well, we joke about Mark every week. I mean, I do believe his personalized plate is Eeyore.
Yeah, I think that's his picture in my contact card on my phone. Is a picture of Eeyore when Mark calls me. Yeah, and I didn't even set it up; it just happened. It's like my phone knew, just figured it out.
It's listening. It's listening.
It is. Yeah.
So anyway, that was fun, and the Mariners did win more on this last road trip than they lost, so that's good too. So. Hopefully they're going to, like I said, go to the World Series this year, and everything will be good in Seattle.
Baseball is a long game. Baseball is a long game. You can't.
It is a long season. It is a long season. They're doing good. No, they're doing good. I hope they can make some good trades, kind of keep furthering things along. And as Mark mentioned, I will always choose to be positive and support, right? So, no, they're doing well, and things have been really good here. We're actually here, you folks listening to us can't see, but we have Phil here with us today, and Phil is taking over as our marketing director, so we're really excited to have him on board. I think he's just listening. I don't know if he's ready for his first radio appearance. Are you ready for your first radio appearance, Phil?
I was born ready.
There we go. Just a single statement. That was all we needed. So we're really happy to have Phil.
I was going to say, new head of marketing, and I'm looking at his notes. All right, first thing to do, get rid of Morgan. What are we doing?
Got to cut him from the team. No. So, yeah, we're happy to have Phil. And, it's exciting for Mark and myself because we've been able to, create positions here at the office and create jobs. And that really, for us, just is a great indication that we're growing and that we're making advancement. And ultimately, from our perspective, what this really brings is the opportunity to take care of our clients better. The less time that Mark and I are involved in all these things that it takes to run the business, the less time we spend doing that, the more time we can spend taking care of our clients, right? And so that's really the goal, is to try and have everybody wear their specific hat. So that we, again, right at the end of the day, the whole purpose behind this is to make sure that we do the best that we can for our clients. And, now might be a good time for us we like to do this from time to time. Just say thank you. Say thank you to our listeners. Say thank you to our clients. We recognize that it's a very trusted position that we're in, to be able to play a small part in these people's retirement lives. And it really is a privilege to us. It's something that we're very proud of and that we take very, very seriously. And ultimately, the reason we're here today, it always comes back to education, right? That's the goal. Our goal is to educate, to help people feel empowered so that they can make decisions, make right decisions, and feel confident about what they've done, and have that confidence as they move into retirement. So we're excited to be here.
Yeah, in fact, this first discussion we want to have on staggered retirements, what does that really mean? And I want to bring this up because this probably doesn't get talked about enough. And we believe it's really critical because a good example is a couple one of them wanted to get ready to retire. He'd been a banker for nearly 40 years, and he wanted out, right? And I can understand that. He wanted to go do something that he wanted to do. But the wife, she was a very talented graphic artist, designer, had a really thriving career, and really she was worried about losing that professional identity, which I think a lot of people we've talked with, that's a true concern. And so I just think what's important is that communication and talking about this before anyone says, oh, I'm going to pull the trigger, because it can really cause some tension and some friction in households. And I don't think this gets talked enough as it should be. And I liked what this article talked about, because it made a really profound statement here. It said, if Todd delayed retiring until Mary was ready, he would miss years of doing what he wanted to. On the other hand, if Mary felt pressured to retire before she was ready to, it is likely that she would be resentful. But this is the key thought. They wisely sought help in making the decision. The process helped them understand each other's needs and to consider the pros and cons of each one of those decisions. And Casey and I have faced this over the years, where one would look at the other when we were having a discussion about something, and they've been married 40 years or longer, and they would say, I didn't know you felt that way, right?
It happens.
And some of you listening out there might know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is a big deal, because what you don't want to have is resentment on either side of the coin, right? Because there's two different lives, maybe going two different directions, and it can cause some heartache and some concern if you don't talk about it and be willing to listen to the other's position.
Well, staggered retirement, we talk about it, and let's just assume, Mark, you're hitting on something where they're around the same age, right? And
right.
There might not be that discussion on, hey, hun, or hey, hubby, have we thought about how we're going to do retirement? That's if they're around the same age. A lot of times there's a nice age gap between the couple, and it just makes sense to talk about a staggered retirement, and again, the younger working a little bit longer. But again, it's about having the conversation, and as you guys always say, have it be part of the planning process.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and we have it both ways, really. We're talking about staggered retirements here, and you mentioned something important, right? Is that age gap. So if we have one spouse that's 5, 6, 7 years older, and let's say they retire at full retirement age for Social Security, which generally speaking is 67, right? That's where most people are going to fall as ages continue to go higher. But if the older spouse is going to retire at 67 and there's a 5-year age gap, that means that the younger spouse is 62. Well, if they were to start their Social Security at 62, they're going to take a permanent reduction, right? So if they don't start their Social Security, that's a bigger strain on their finances for those first 5 years of retirement before they get to Social Security age, right, for full retirement. So there's a lot of things to consider, and it's not that isn't doable. It absolutely is, and we have clients do it all the time. We've actually talked about the clients that I have in mind right now where the husband is actually 10 years older, and he's retiring in his early 60s, 61, and the wife is retiring at 51. They're retiring within a month of each other. So, but they've saved very well. They've worked very hard. They live a lifestyle within their means, right? So they're set up in a very different way than a lot of people are to be able to both retire early and the wife to actually retire substantially early, right? And so we have another client that comes to mind that's actually, they're almost the exact same age, but the husband is going to continue to work. Even though he's older, he's going to continue to work. He's happy to work, doesn't mind it. He enjoys what he does. And the wife, who's 51, was feeling stressed out from work, and it was overwhelming. But again, they've saved very well. They have a great plan. They've taken care of long-term care, all these things, right? So it really is different for each individual person. And this staggered retirement can be really valuable, especially if you have one spouse that is just thinking, I can't do it anymore, right? I'm just overwhelmed. Work is too hard. Maybe I'm aging a little bit, and so I can't keep up with, the physical demands or whatever it is. So, it really can play in to a retirement plan. But again, it's got to be part of the plan, right? This is not something you just make the decision the day you retire. It's got to be built into the plan.
Yeah. In fact, I'd just like to say something really quick, and we're going to bring this into the next segment, but I want to talk about some of the very specific challenges that are created because of a staggered retirement, and we're going to do that on the other side of the break here. So I think if you're listening and you are concerned about maybe this, you want to retire, but maybe the spouse isn't ready to, or you're concerned about taxes. Look at all the volatility in the market right now. We don't know what's happening totally with tariffs yet. We know inflation has kind of been, rearing its ugly head now for a couple of years, and we're all getting tired of that, right? I think, so if you've got a concern about this, please give us a call. Let us help. We want everybody to know if you've saved $250,000 or more, just keep your checkbook at home and let's have a conversation. These strategies will work really good for you, and we've got a wonderful team that will help you to put together a plan that can make a very successful retirement a reality and not just be a fairy tale. So please pick up the phone, give us a call.
All right, complimentary appointment awaits. Here's the phone number, 866-668-3625. That number again, 866-668-3625. This is complimentary. If you've saved $250,000 or more towards your retirement, these strategies are going to work best for you. Call the number, secure an appointment. We've got 10 of them, 866-668-3625. When we come back, we'll continue with some of the challenges when you are faced with a staggered retirement as a couple. That's coming up next. We are back on Elevate Your Wealth. Your hosts are Mark Stimpson and Casey Elkins. They got over 42 years combined experience, and you can find them right here in Seattle, Elevated Financial Management. Check out the website, nice resource, efmnw.com. Again, all letters, efmnw.com. They've got links to the TV show. They've got radio shows in podcast form. Just good information on retirement. Certified financial fiduciaries, yes, they are, and it's all about getting you ready for retirement. I'm Morgan Patrick. My pleasure to go back and forth with the advisors. And we've kind of started off the show today just talking about staggered retirement. If you're in a couple scenario and one retires before the other, what's going to be happening here? And there are some challenges. And Mark, you brought it up as we were ending our first portion of the program. So let's get into this. Staggered retirement, some of the challenges.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this. The first one always involves money, right, or spending. And so if let's say the husband decides to retire earlier than the spouse does, right, and he's thinking, you know what, wife's working, I'm going to do a little traveling, right? So is the wife going to be okay with that when you start to make plans to do some traveling?
Where's my buzzer? Where's
that ain't happening.
Not going to work.
I have a buzzer in here.
Honey, I'm going to go to an exotic location and sit on the beach by myself.
Yeah, I had a great time without you.
Yeah. See, that's just going to cause a little bit of stress, right? And I love we all know that's kind of a given, right? But what about a different routine? Maybe, you're at home, the spouse is working, you're a little bored, you've got friends that are working, but at night, you want to make some plans. You're going to go meet up with your buddies, right? They're off now, and you can go and maybe go, have a drink or two or go do something else. Go to Golf Tech or, Top Golf, whatever you want to do, go bowling. Doesn't really matter, but your wife, let's say it's the wife that was working all day, she's going to be tired, she's not going to want to go. So could that lead to her possibly feeling a little left out? Different social networks that can develop when you're not working, because we all know that a lot of our clients, their social life has been completely tied up in their work routine, their work friends. And when that terminates, most of us are going to need, that are social beings anyway, are going to want to have to develop some other networks. So how's that going to go? Could that make the other one feel a little left out? I don't know if you got some thoughts, Case.
Well, those different routines, that's a big deal, right? Because I think that's one that people really miss, and it has a big impact, right? And when we mention it, I think, maybe some feel like, oh, it's kind of a no-brainer. But how does that impact the spouse that has to go to work, right? You get up and go to work every day. You're looking at your mate that is still asleep and, came home late last night from hanging with their friends or, whatever they did, right? And you're like, man, I still got to go to work. Like, what the heck, right? So, that has a big impact, right? And
exactly.
if you're planning on working for 5 years past your spouse, are you going to be able to do that for 5 years? 6 months is one thing, a year is one thing, but 3, 4, 5 years, right? That could really start to get old. So have you had that conversation? And is there some version of that, right? Where maybe the other spouse at times, maybe comes to work and has lunch with you, right? You don't want to be two ships passing in the night, right? Where you just end up living two totally different lives. That's not the purpose behind a staggered retirement. So it takes planning to be able to make that work, not only financially, but you'll notice what we're talking about is not really the finances behind this. We're really talking about the emotional aspect behind this, because that is something, and Mark and I talk about this all the time. That is what gets missed in our industry, is talking about the reality of actual retirement, right? The finances are one thing. I can plug some numbers into a computer. We can do some great planning. I can show you a few things. That's wonderful, right? And it takes a skill set to do that. It takes a talent to do that. It does. But how does it impact you emotionally? How does it impact your relationships, your marriage, what the future holds for you? There's a lot to this. And this is a big thing when people are retiring at different ages. And it does have a big impact, and it needs to be discussed.
In fact, it's funny, Case, you mentioned this because this article talked about how do we move forward. And one of the first challenges is these issues are going to bubble up if you don't talk about them. There needs to be clear and concise, communication about this. And I love how this one couple, they called it, they talked about this and they came up with what they call the happiness portfolio. But they got input from both sides before either one of them started to go down a different path from the other, right? And I love this last sentence in this paragraph. It said, the key to navigating these sometimes turbulent waters is clear and effective communication and a plan for how their new life will unfold, which usually means a lot of times maybe getting a third party involved, right? That can be a little more neutral and take each side into consideration when these things come up, because sometimes we can get emotional about things, and when emotion takes over, we all know what can happen, right? So again, this is where a planner can really help a couple when they're trying to navigate these waters. There could be some pretty choppy water if you're not careful.
Yeah, that's it, right? And it ultimately comes back to communication, like you said, Mark, and improper expectations. Because if you don't communicate, that's where the improper expectation comes from, right? You're making an assumption. You don't realize you're making an assumption, right? Because you're thinking your spouse thinks a certain way or wants to do things the way you want to do things. But there's a real specific example that comes to mind. We were talking about with these clients, and I said, "What do you want to do when you retire, right? Like, what are the goals?" And the one spouse immediately jumps in, right, and says, "Oh, I want to travel, and I haven't been to Europe, and I want to go to Europe and spend some time in Italy." And really, they got like this great idea, right? This wonderful picture of what retirement's going to be, and they can't see it, but I can see that the other spouse is kind of like, I don't know about that, right? And then when the first spouse gets done talking, the other goes, "Well, yeah, I really don't want to travel in retirement. That's not what I want to do." And I'm sitting there like, oh man, this is not, I don't know how to help here, right? And the thing is we're not trying to make light of it. We're not trying to make fun of folks. What we're trying to do is to illustrate that you got to have these conversations together, because you have two spouses that have been married for 30 years or 40 years or however long. And one of them is absolutely set on traveling the world and thinks that the other spouse wants to do the same. And the other spouse is absolutely set on not traveling the world and thinks that the other spouse wants to do the same. And so those are two totally opposite things. And they had never talked about it,
They're
right?
on different pages, yeah.
They're on different
completely.
pages. And that's where this becomes so important, this happiness portfolio or whatever we want to call it, where we're communicating about what we want and what we don't want. And maybe there is a version of this where one spouse travels with a friend or a family member and the other doesn't, right? And that's okay, but it needs to be discussed so you're on the same page and it's not just, you go from 0 to 100, right?
Well, and what's so funny about this individual, too, I'll never forget the husband said he would be fine on the porch watching the grass grow. I will never forget that statement. See, and you talk about the opposite, right? And again, if we don't, kind of talk about this, like Casey just mentioned, there's going to be some friction. If it doesn't come up immediately, it's going to come up, and somebody's going to it's going to be Mount Vesuvius, right, when it finally does fester. Because we need to figure out, I love some of these concerns. How are we going to manage our finances with only one income? You got to talk about that, right? Because money leads to problems. We all know that if we don't talk about it. I love, what are our assumptions about our life going forward? What are our daily routines going to look like? How are we going to nurture our connection? Because like Casey mentioned, if we're just two ships passing in the night, that connection is not going to build. In fact, it's going to get farther and farther stretched, right, until
you just
one
become
may
roommates
say,
at that point,
exactly,
right?
And it can lead to divorce, or separation. So again, we got to be careful about this, and we need to be willing to talk about it, because this really can cause some issues if you don't talk with somebody that cares.
Well, I was just going to add, too, gentlemen, that a lot of times you work your entire life as a couple. You're both at your jobs, and then all of a sudden you're going to be together quite a bit. That takes some work. You're not used to being around each other that much.
Right.
So really kind of investing in the relationship. And the word compromise is going to be used quite a bit when it comes to certain things. But the overall picture really is helped by having that plan, having an opportunity to sit down and, as Mark pointed out, have a third party kind of work with you on the finances part, but also talk about the emotional side too.
Yeah, it does. It takes both, right? And I think that's part of what we really try to bring to the table. So if you've been listening to this and this has sparked some questions for you or some things that you want to discuss, this is your opportunity to do that in a no pressure, no obligation, complimentary scenario. You can come into our office. We'll have a discussion about what you want, about what you're looking for, and we'll help you build a retirement plan to show you how it can be done. Or maybe there's some gaps. Maybe there's some improvements that you need to make between now and retirement. And this is your opportunity to figure that out. So we'll talk about taxes. We'll talk about timing for retirement, Social Security, Medicare, long-term care. We'll discuss all these things, like I said, in a complimentary fashion, no obligation. Don't hesitate. Pick up the phone. Give us a call.
We've got 10 appointments. We call it our top 10, and you can jump into the top 10 simply by calling the number 866-668-3625. Again, the number 866-668-3625. If you've saved $250,000 or more towards your retirement, these strategies are going to work best for you. Call the number, secure an appointment. They're cost-free. You're leaving the checkbook at home. See if you're on the right page when it comes to retirement. 866-668-3625. When we return on Elevate Your Wealth, Social Security finances erode further and could spell benefit cuts. We'll talk about that coming up next. Elevate Your Wealth, hosted by Casey Elkins and Mark Stimpson. You can find them right here in Seattle, Elevated Financial Management. The website is a resource, efmnw.com, all letters, efmnw.com. Again, there's TV show links. You can check them out on TV, and our radio shows are in podcast form, but just good information, background information on Mark and Casey. All right, 42 combined years of experience in the retirement planning business. They are certified financial fiduciaries. I'm Morgan Patrick, and this is a customized show. We have so much fun talking about the latest articles when it comes to retirement. You're going to have questions about your own retirement situation. We have complimentary appointments. We'll give you the information to grab one of them a little bit later in this portion of the program, so stay tuned for that. And these are cost-free. It's an opportunity for you to see if you're on track for retirement. So, gentlemen, you thought this article, and I agree with you 100%, is worthy of talking about today. Social Security's finances erode further and could spell benefit cuts. We'll start with you, Mark. this is always going to be a concern.
Yeah, and this is something that I think we talk on a regular basis about Social Security, right? It is a major pillar for most Americans. They need that as a source of guaranteed income. Now, Casey and I probably have a little bit of a difference of opinion as to what's going to happen here, but the last couple of weeks, this is getting more and more news because for the last probably, I don't know, at least 15 years, Congress has wanted to just kick the can down the road and not deal with Social Security and the funding issues, or I should say the lack of funding that is going to be happening when the trust fund does run out. Now, the latest, report has just come out, trustees report, and they actually have cut another year off as to when they think the trust fund will be up and gone. And so if they don't do something, realistically, the last number was about a 23% cut. So you can imagine if you were living on $2,000 a month, and we'll make easy math and say 25%, it'll be a little less than that, but all of a sudden you're reduced to $1,500 a month. Do you have a plan as to how you're going to replace that? Because they're now saying that, our Social Security is going to be in dire straits within 8 years. So let's just say 2033, right? And they're actually saying that Medicare could actually be in more trouble than Social Security is. So again, and a lot of us that are on Medicare, which I am, is something that does matter. And we better have a plan if things really deteriorate more than what they already are. We know our current president says he's not going to mess with Social Security benefits, but talk is cheap. And if they don't do something with a deficit, this is going to be a real issue that we're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, it'd be a massive issue. I mean, this is major, right? And for the folks that's their only income source, I mean, even a much larger issue, right? But even if Social Security is a small piece of income for you, right? Let's say you got $10,000 a month coming in retirement, and $3,500 of that is Social Security. Well, if you lose, let's say $700, $800, $1,000, if you lose $1,000 and your income is $10,000, that's 10%, right? So that's 10%, and that 10% might be your fund money, right? That might be your travel money. That might be your, just discretionary spending, right? And that has a big impact on your retirement. What we're talking about is people that are currently 59. By the time they're 67 in 2033, that's when this is going to be a problem, right? So if you're 5 years from retirement, this is not that far off for you, right? Yeah. This is potentially a big issue. Now, that being said, that also means that there's time for it to be addressed, right, before you get to 67. But this is really something that needs to be discussed with your planner. Now, it is a little complicated to build this into a financial plan, right? To build in a cut of your Social Security 7 years from now.
And you don't know what the numbers are. You really don't.
That's it, right? And it's not a sure thing. So we're hesitant to build in these like major what ifs that are just kind of really, they're kind of scary, right? We need to be prepared. We need to discuss. We need to talk about what that might look like. And so we're not necessarily saying that this needs to be built into your plan, but it is something you want to have an understanding about, and you should at least have a discussion as to how this impacts you. And if you did lose $1,000 a month, is your plan built so that, well, $1,000 a month, that still hurts. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt, but I still have another $1,000 a month that is discretionary, right? Like, what does that look like for you? Because the plans that we like to build, if you want, like I said, let's just use $10,000 a month in retirement. It's easy numbers, right? Let's say you want $10,000 a month in retirement, and that's going to let you live a good life. We want to build a plan for you that has $11,000 or $12,000 a month coming in, because then you can go live more life. And if you got extra income and you don't spend it, well, then great, you can save it, and it's very comfortable, it's very safe, and that accounts for what these potential issues might bring with Social Security. And if that doesn't happen with Social Security, great, then you can just live more retirement, right? That's the type of plans we like to put together. But it's a discussion that has to be had, right? And so far, that's kind of the theme of our show today, is have that discussion, right? Have those details. and understand how they all play together.
I tell you, I think it's a perfect segue to talk about strategies to boost your savings. Because what if retirement is not going to be leaning as hard on Social Security? And look, folks, I mean, we don't have a crystal ball, but it certainly looks like it's going to be changing. So how do you create more savings, especially since you're still out there, assumingly still working, guys? So how can we boost our retirement savings so Social Security will be just what Casey said? It would be an added bonus. It wouldn't be something that we were heavily leaning on.
Yeah. Well, one of the issues that doesn't get talked about as much as it should is the declining birth rate. See, that is an issue that needs to be discussed, because with fewer workers, it's those of us that are working each week and we get a paycheck and we pay into FICA, and that's really what pays the majority of all the benefits, right, that Social Security has to deal with, and Medicare. And so if the number of workers continues to decrease with lower birth rates, it puts more pressure on the fund. And that's really one of the driving issues that you're right. We don't know how many babies are going to be born. Now, they estimate it. Actuaries work on this stuff day in and day out. But this is a maybe. And again, that's why we are so compelled to want our clients to have a plan, so that if these cuts do happen, do we have a safety net of some sort that we can draw on? Because like Casey mentioned, if you're living on pure Social Security, when it was designed and went into effect basically when FDR was president, it was only supposed to maybe account for 30% of your retirement dollars. We were supposed to have pensions. We were supposed to have, pensions is the big thing that's gone away right now. It's been replaced with 401ks and 457s and 403bs. But the point is that you are responsible now to make your retirement a success, and you can't count on anybody else to do it. So if you don't have a plan, you might be in big trouble.
Well, let's open it up now. We've got appointments. There are 10 of them. We call it our top 10. They are complimentary. We've got one more article we're going to talk about in this portion of the program, but I do want to make this available to you right now. If you've saved $250,000 or more towards your retirement, these strategies are going to work best for you. Grab one of the appointments right now. 866-668-3625. That's 866-668-3625. Again, there's no cost to this. There's no obligation, meaning you're not agreeing to become a client if you grab one of these appointments, and Elevated Financial Management not agreeing to take you as a client. This is a total test drive. Get to know you, see if you're comfortable. Again, 866-668-3625. All right, gentlemen, final article, strategies to boost retirement savings. What can we do?
I think the biggest thing really comes down to behavioral finance. That's really what it is, right? I mean, this article talks about a few different things that you can do, but at the end of the day, saving is on you. Whether you save it in an IRA or a Roth or those types of things, there's different ways to save. There's different places to save, and there's different benefits to each one. But if you are not saving as much as you should, it doesn't really matter all that much where you save it, right? The first step is to be aware of what you're spending. And this is something that gets missed a lot. And I'll highlight this. This is not just for folks that are, lower income or average income. Even people that have high income still need to be aware of where they're spending, right? Because gosh, I remember when, like we've talked about before, right? When my wife and we were first starting out, we found a way to live on $40,000, $50,000 a year, right? That was what we had coming in, and we found a way to make it work. But then we made $60,000 a year. And I'll tell you what, I didn't save 10 grand. I spent 10 grand more, right? Yeah. We lived more life. And then we made 75, right? And well, I didn't save that extra 15. I spent it, right? And so you have lifestyle creep. And that happens even for folks. I mean, we have people that come in all the time that are high earners that make $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 a year, which is a tremendous amount of money, right? And yet they're not saving $300,000 a year, right? Now, that doesn't mean that they're not saving well, but the point being that you need to still live within your means. You still need to know where you're spending. And especially once you've decided to start taking retirement seriously, and we see this a lot where it feels like eventually people do decide to start taking retirement saving more seriously. And once you turn that corner, man, you can really do some damage, right? You can really do some damage. You can save well. And it puts you in a spot to be able to get ahead a little bit. This is your opportunity to get that now. This is your opportunity to call in and get a financial plan, right, Mark?
Yeah, and this is something that we've been talking about this now. Maybe you're a little concerned about your own saving strategy, or you're concerned about where the money is going to come from each month. Do you have guaranteed sources of income? What about Medicare? What are you going to do as far as Medicare supplement or a Med Advantage plan? What do I do there? Or what's the best way to leave money to our children? Please pick up the phone, give us a call. All we want to do is just have a conversation and see if we can't put a plan in place or help you to put a plan in place to make your retirement a total success.
We are here to help. Elevated Financial Management. Call this number. Grab one of our complimentary appointments. 866-668-3625. That's 866-668-3625. 10 of them. Get into our top 10. Call the number. Grab it right now. 866-668-3625. When we return, it's time for retirement scenarios. They happen all over the country. I'll throw them at the fellas, see what they come up with. Welcome back into Elevate Your Wealth. Your hosts are Mark Stimpson and Casey Elkins. You can find them right here in Seattle. Elevated Financial Management, 42 combined years experience in the retirement planning business. They are certified financial fiduciaries. They have a website that is a resource. Check it out, efmnw.com. All letters, efmnw.com. There are links to the TV show. Our radio shows are in podcast form. Really good information on retirement. And again, if you've got any questions about your situation, get in contact with Elevated Financial Management and set up one of their complimentary appointments. Again, I'm Morgan Patrick. My pleasure to go back and forth. And it is always about just the importance of being ready for retirement. All right, guys, I've got the scenarios in front of me. These happen all over the country. We bring them together and we see what you come up with. Just want to remind our listeners that they are scenarios. You may hear one that's similar to what you're going through, but it's not exactly what you're going through, so make sure you have a customized plan. All right, first one up, guys, is this one. Their income sources include Social Security, there's a small pension, also an annuity, and retirement savings. They're confused about how to coordinate withdrawals out of these accounts from all of these different sources. They want to minimize taxes and create steady income. How do you build an efficient retirement income plan with multiple income streams like this?
I just want to say that these sources, they've got nice different places where this money is going to come from. Social Security, a pension, which so many don't have today, right? An annuity, which is basically a private pension, and then retirement savings. One of the things that I don't think gets talked about enough, because it can be confusing as to when I should draw money out of different accounts, especially if they're a qualified account, a pre-tax account, like a traditional IRA or a 457 or a 403B. One of the things we know that if you reach full retirement age based on the year that you were born, so somebody that is born 1960 or later, full retirement age is 67. So if you wait till 67 to draw, you're going to get no reduction, permanent reduction, which can be as much of a reduction as 30% of your money. And that's a pretty big chunk over a lifetime. So is there a way to preserve that? And the cool thing is, if you're fortunate enough to be able to wait till 70, we know that Social Security grows by 8% guaranteed every year. That's like an 8% annuity or an 8% COLA on a pension. And I'll tell you what, there isn't anybody with a pension that wouldn't love an 8% growth every year on that pension, right? My Boeing clients, their pension is what we call static. Whatever they started with, that's what they're going to get 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So a COLA is a big deal. So what I think about sometimes is if a client has retirement money in a qualified plan, let's think about turning that on earlier, taking money out of the plan out of the 401k, let's say, pay tax at probably the lowest rate you're ever going to see in your lifetime, and let the Social Security build up at that guaranteed 8%, because you're not guaranteed on your qualified money. A lot of planners don't think about that, especially at the big box stores. They want somebody to use Social Security first, right? We know that. And that could be actually the wrong way to do it. So working with someone that really does tax planning along with income planning can make a real difference. It's, as Casey always says, it's not how much you have, but it's how much you keep.
That's right. Yeah. And, I think that's really important. We were just talking about Social Security earlier in the show. And so those Social Security concerns really play into this, right? As to thinking, well, I should start my Social Security at 62 because it's going to run out, so I got to get as much money as I can. And that can play in. Now, we're not saying that you just disregard that. That's not the point that we're trying to make. But how do all of these things work together, right? And I say this a lot, but I keep saying it because I think it's something that gets missed by a lot of people. When you make a decision about your retirement in a silo, meaning you look at Social Security and you go, it's going to run out, I'm going to take it at 62. You're making that decision in a silo. That's just a singular decision. When you make that decision, it's like dropping a rock in a pond, and it has a ripple effect on your other retirement accounts. And it starts to change how your other decisions then have to be made. What we're encouraging is to look at this whole picture, which is really what the scenario is asking about, right? The scenario is saying, I have Social Security, I have a pension, I have an annuity, I have other retirement accounts, and I want them all to work well together. I want everything to play properly in the sandbox so that I can make the most efficient, optimized decisions. And I love that, because that is what really allows you to have a successful retirement plan, is to fit all the pieces together instead of making these individual decisions. Oh, well, I'm going to invest this way in, I'm a 60-40. I'm a 60-40 in my 401k over here, which is great. And then I've got a bunch of NVIDIA stock in my individual account. And then I'm going to start Social Security at 62, and I'm going to let my pension roll up. Well, are those really complementing each other, right? Are they really working together, or are they just decisions? Are they just individual decisions that have been made? And oftentimes what we see, those are just individual decisions. They're not founded on information from the other decisions that have to be made and trying to play each one to its strength. And that's where we come back to purpose-built, purpose-driven planning. And that's what we mean by that. When we use that phrase, it's not just a catchphrase because it sounds cool. It's really the intent. That's the whole purpose behind this, is to make everything work together. So you want to minimize taxes and create steady income. The easiest way for us to answer that is to say to have a retirement plan that considers everything that you have. Because if you only have two accounts, well, creating steady income and minimizing taxes, there's probably not a whole lot to figure out there if you only have the two accounts, right? But if you added a pension and an annuity, and you've got some Roth money, and you've got some individual money, and you bought Microsoft stock in 1998, well, now there's a lot of things to consider, right? And that's where we're coming at this from, is to have something that collectively looks at the whole picture for your individual circumstance.
I tell you, I liked it. Purpose-driven planning. I mean, it comes down to the individual or the couple that's retiring, because guess what? It's going to be different for everybody.
Yep.
Having a plan, being ready for your own scenario, that's what we talk about each and every week. Now, to get on the calendar with Elevated Financial Management, a complimentary, no-obligation appointment, all you've got to do is call 866-668-3625. Grab one of our 10. We call it our top 10. Say, hey, I want in the top 10. They'll put you there. 866-668-3625. Again, no cost, no obligation. All right, next scenario, federal employee, age 65, $600,000 in the TSP, wants to know if they can leave their TSP untouched and avoid withdrawals until they absolutely need the funds. What rules apply to TSP accounts in terms of mandatory withdrawals, and what flexibility do they have in withdrawal timing?
For a federal employee, TSP, right, that's a thrift savings plan. If you're a federal employee, you're aware of what that is, but a lot of people don't know what that means. Essentially, that's a 401k for a federal employee. It's roughly the same. It's not exactly the same, but very similar, right? And so somebody who's 65 does have time to sort out how they are going to start taking withdrawals and when they're going to start taking withdrawals. But they do have required minimum distributions to deal with, right? Eventually. And so somebody who's 65, well, right now those RMDs start at age 73, unless they were still working, right? Now, there's details behind this. And what I'll say is this. The TSP, I'm not here to knock the TSP, but I will say that it has very limited investment choices. So very rarely do we encourage somebody to leave their money in a TSP. Not that some of the choices there aren't good, they are, but there's a lot more options outside of a TSP if you move the money into an IRA. Now, usually the next question becomes, well, if I take my money out of my TSP, I'm going to pay taxes on everything, right? No, you can do what's called a rollover. So you can roll that money from your TSP to an IRA. That means you will not have to pay taxes on moving that money. And now you have more control and you have a broader array of investment choices. And the great thing about that is you're more likely to find the right investment choice that fits what you're trying to do in your specific circumstance, considering all the pieces to retirement, and then hopefully set yourself up for better success.
Yeah, and we actually have a lot of clients that have TSP plans, and we're working with some right now. What's the best strategy? Do they, a lot of federal employees are loyal, right? Like our Boeing clients are loyal too. But loyalty, you have to think about that. Casey hit on such an important point. If that money gets rolled from the TSP plan over to, let's say, Schwab, right, into their own IRA, their investment options, I like to say, go through the roof, because they do. You have a lot more choices to put your money into and actually create higher returns. Now, they're not guaranteed to be higher. We all know that. We're not saying that. But with more options comes more chance of maybe hitting a different type of home run, you could say, right? You can diversify a little differently. So again, it can be a really, really powerful place to move funds. And it's a non-taxable event, as Casey mentioned. One of the things is you have to separate from service, right? Or a lot of money, we're working with some people now, they're not 59 and a half, so they're stuck too, right? Because they can't take that money out because they haven't reached 59 and a half. They can, but then you're going to be looking at a 10% early withdrawal penalty, and we don't want that to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that TSP, for relative ease of understanding, operates roughly the same as a 401k when it comes to RMDs, right? When it comes to having to take money out. Now, you can delay that all the way till age 73, but then you're going to have to start taking money out. That RMD age is going up. They have a plan to push that up to age 75. So if you have further questions about that and you want to find out what this looks like in your circumstance, this is your opportunity. This is your chance to figure out what are those RMDs going to look like for you. Is there anything that you can do to retain more control over those investments and put yourself in a better spot tax-wise? Is there something that you can do to optimize your Social Security and make sure that you strengthen that move along with the other accounts that you have and really have this whole picture put together? So this is your chance for a written financial plan, no obligation, completely complimentary. Don't hesitate. Give us a shout.
All right, jump on these appointments right now. Call this number, 866-668-3625. That's 866-668-3625. Complimentary appointment awaits. Talk about your retirement scenario. 866-668-3625. Another edition of Elevate Your Wealth is in the books. For Mark and Casey, I'm Morgan. We'll see you on the radio next week.
Investment advisory services offered through Foundations Investment Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. The content provided is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The views, statements, and opinions expressed herein are those of the individual speakers and not necessarily those of Foundations and its affiliates. The information contained herein does not constitute an offer to sell any securities or represent an express or implied opinion or endorsement of any specific opportunity, offering, or issuer. Any discussion of performance or returns is not indicative of future results. Each individual investor situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstances. Foundations only transacts business in states where it is properly registered or excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement of the firm by securities regulators and does not mean the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. No legal or tax advice is provided. Always consult with a tax professional. All rights reserved.